It's our blessed privilege once again to join in worship to our Almighty God in heaven and to sit at His feet daily in receiving His special instructions for us, living in these last days, to turn back to God's Word, which is ancient but yet valuable, and it is salvific. It gives us salvation, a knowledge of salvation, keeping us on the path of righteousness, preparing us for God's kingdom. God, in His infinite wisdom, He has seen fit through His servants to give us this information even thousands of years before our time, to give even specific instructions for our day-to-day life. And as we will see today in the book of Proverbs and in the last few days, such important and practical lessons that we many times overlook. But God is gracious, He is good and loving, and He wants His children to truly be His representatives, living in this world, walking among the evil and wicked people, to share God's love and character. Today we look at verses 17 to 19 of Psalms 25, Proverbs 25. Reading from the scripture, verse 17, seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, lest he become weary of you and hate you. Verse 18 and 19, a man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. Confidence in an unfaithful man in times of trouble is like a bad tooth and a foot out of joint. These describe so beautifully the conditions in this world. Solomon, as a king, one who not only lived in his in his palace, but he actually knew what was happening with the people in his kingdom. Solomon saw the life of people. He too experienced a life that was experienced by his subjects. And so he is giving us message and information which is so relevant to us. He's talking about living in our society, in our community, with our neighbors surrounding us. And that's how perhaps it is in a rural setting. We have neighbors all around. And when people get time, maybe in the evening after the day's work is done, or when a day is not so busy, people get to meet each other. They spend time together, visiting and talking with each other. And Solomon saw this. And of course, he too probably was one who was visiting his neighbors. But he saw how people, and some of them were perhaps spending longer time, visiting more frequently, and consequently, when you become familiar with your neighbors, you spend time You speak to them perhaps even more openly and intimately. And above all, this condition can lead to gossip, busybodies, people spending time talking together about things which are not as important that we should give time for. Even in the ancient times, it was a custom and practice. Giving hospitality to neighbors or even strangers was expected, as God told his people, "You were strangers in a foreign land, and I made sure you had good relationships with your neighbors, so they treated you kindly." But in receiving hospitality, you should also be willing to return hospitality, to extend hospitality to others. But hospitality can become such a wonderful point of attachment that there may be instances and people who tend to take advantage of such situations. Just because somebody is hospitable, you cannot be their regular visitor. If you have time on hand to spend, your neighbor may not be as free with his time, but has things to do, but he's entertaining you because you're visiting him. And through such visits repeated, certainly you will become somebody that would be hated. And so the wise man is telling us that we should exercise caution in dealing with people, in receiving hospitality, in visiting people. Of course, we should be cautious, we should see the need, and we should meet the needs, of course, but never to overstep, never to overdo what we are doing. Even if it is kindness that we are extending, can be worn out by frequent use. So these are certainly words that we should remember. A wise man or a woman should be sensitive to see the and to sense the situation, be it with our neighbors. See if your visits are not as graciously appreciated and entertained. And when you see that they are growing weary of your presence, that's a signal that we should be cautious to watch for and never to overburden your neighbors. Be a good guest, but never to take advantage of somebody's goodness. You should be one who people may wait for a visit. And if it is more frequent, that special awaiting may become common. And so visit people appropriately, visit them certainly in times of their need, and never to make yourself a burden to someone. Even friendship has limits. Some people think as friends, there are no boundaries, no limits. to your association and interaction. Even in friendship, we should be discreet. We should be sensitive not to intrude into the privacy of others. Of course, this is very much a Western thinking. Privacy is very safely and sacredly guarded. Even best of friends are warned that they should always never undermine privacy of an individual. Everybody needs a space in their own right, for their own privacy, and it is, of course, highly respected and regarded in the Western world. But for us in the Eastern context, it is so interesting to see everybody wants to know everything about everyone. This is very true. When people ask us information, they want to know what you ate, and even more closely related, intimate information that you may not be sometimes comfortable to share. But people show certainly maybe concern, but in our country, there is not much of privacy that people try to retain in your neighbor or friend. They want to get as close and intrude almost into your privacy. While this kind of conditions do exist, we are warned by the wise man. Be discreet. In your association, make your presence required and enjoyable, and let them look forward to your visit rather than ever being wearied of your presence. In the Hebrew language, interestingly, there are different proverbial adjectives. When a traveler stays for one day, there is a Hebrew word. But when a person stays a little longer, they begin to become a burden. And they have another word. They are still somebody who is receiving hospitality, but staying for a longer time, they become a burden. And then lastly, if you are staying so long, tarrying for long times, they will even treat you like an outcast, virtually hunted out of their house. And so we know there are people with different kinds of mentalities in this world, and people who are not as much careful, and sometimes in accepting hospitality, in enjoying friendship. The wise man is telling us, let us be careful. As we learned yesterday, even in enjoying something so good and tasty like honey, we should exercise restraint. For eating much of even honey, which is good for our health, can have adverse effects. It can cause nausea and high sugar and such instances. And likewise, in friendship, in association, in dealing with our neighbors, he says, be careful to exercise such restraint sense very quickly what others are expressing to you, though not in spoken words, but by their actions and their behavior, I suppose. We should be careful never to make yourself unwanted. Hospitality is to be appreciated and never to be exploited. If you become a case of causing weariness, even your best of friends may begin to hate you. And so let us be sensitive to our neighbors, their needs, and how your presence is being enjoyed, appreciated, and make that occasion of your visit something which they would look forward to rather than ever trying to become a burden or something nauseating, even like having eaten much of honey. Never to take undue advantage of another person's hospitality. And to add to it, to make your visits quick, short, never to cause weariness, or in our modern terms, not to spend time in wasting time, but get to your business, let your visit be fruitful, and you should plan to leave even without having to exploit somebody's goodness and wasting their time and becoming a nuisance. Company is good, but good company will never cause irritation to someone when it is overdone. So Solomon, even in his culture, seeing this, is warning us the immense importance of hospitality. Yes, hosts are expected to be gracious. They're generous and helpful to those who are in need, to a visitor, to an unknown stranger, or even to loved ones, of course. But enjoying all of these, we should ever be careful never to be a burden to somebody, never to cause weariness and their displeasure of your presence. As we see in the scriptures, certainly helping our neighbors is strongly exemplified and promoted. James, in chapter 1, verse 27, talking about what it is to be a real Christian in the world he is living, he says, religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this. James is really telling us what it is to live a righteous and a holy life which is accepted before God, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. Yes, the obligation to visit, to help, and to show hospitality is greatly appreciated, and especially to visit orphans, those who are in need, those who have no parental support, either financially or through moral support. We should be there for them. Likewise, for widows who are helpless, who may be aged, children far away. These are people in our society. And James, knowing this condition, especially In the early Christian church period, when husbands would go far to work and many times do not return because of conditions that must have brought their death, having to fight in wars maybe. And so there were many orphans and widows in the early Christian church. And the church did help such people who are in need of help, to be mindful of the needs of others, to care for those who are in desperate conditions. While it is our sacred duty to help such people, care for them, provide for them, and to sustain them during their times of greatest want, while on one side we have to do our part in loving our fellow human beings in need, Paul also warns young Timothy, and that could quite well apply to each one of us, about spending time in our neighbor's house, either as a guest or a host. He says to not spend undue time spending time excuse me, in our neighbor's house. He says in 1 Timothy 5, verse 13, they learn to be idlers, going from house to house. Not only idlers, but also gossips and busybodies, saying what they should not. If you're focused on what you want to accomplish through your visit and talk what you need to visit and convey, and once it is time that we finish our business, it is time to leave. But you spend extra time, what can happen? You begin to spend time in idleness and with acquaintances that you know, spending time in gossip and busybodies, moving up and down, indulging in this activity. Paul says you should be careful not to entertain and even correct such people who are indulging in this kind of an activity. Knowing what is happening in your context, in your situation, in the homes that we visit, we should be very cautious to discern the situations, the conditions, and make our visits as short, as fruitful, but never to become a burden to somebody else. Certainly, the wise man gives us important lessons of how we should be careful in our relationships. In verse 18 to 19, he talks about bearing false witness. And we have seen several times the wise man cautioning us about this experience of bearing false witness against our neighbor. Many proverbs speak against such people who bear a false witness. These are people who tell lies, who speak of things what they have not seen or heard. And this witnessing, especially in the court of law, or even in common conversations, does great damage. It may alter the course of a judgment that is given. It can ruin somebody's life. It can ruin somebody's character or their profile. And so we, as God's people should be careful to represent what we have seen or heard without any bias, to report with accuracy without addition of anything. And we have the ninth commandment, which is so clear that we should not bear false witness against our neighbors or against anybody else. This is certainly very cruel and serious and can even lead to death, of course. This proverb is presenting to us in very clear terms, showing us the wickedness of slander, of false witness, in whatever respect we may be, is as bad as a murder. That's why in the Hebrew context they would need even 2 or 3 witnesses, but these witnesses should give a true report and never bear a false report. The wise man likens such a tongue, so versatile, which many times speaks without restraint, and unless the mind is able to control the tongue can be so powerful and dangerous, and it is likened to a club, a sword, and a sharp arrow. A club, these are all instruments that are used in warfare. For a close in battle, they use a war club. Or if it is at a little distance within your hand's reach, they use a sword in fighting. But for long distances, they fight the bow and arrow. These different instruments that are used in a battle, in a warfare, all designed to cause fatal blows to the enemy, even which is at close range or at a long range. These instruments are as harmful and dangerous. Likewise is a mischievous and evil tongue. Maybe thin, sometimes broad, and sometimes long, but it is like a sword to let out the lifeblood of someone that you use upon. Somebody who may be simply innocent. To destroy somebody by giving a false witness is dangerous. One word that is spoken without much thinking can cause great and serious damage. And the wise man has told us earlier, we should be slow to speak and spend time in hearing. Take much time to hear and be slow to speak. Comparing to, once more in this verse, in verse 19, the wise man compares a false witness to, again, things which needs our serious consideration, that we are to maintain confidence of our neighbors and friends. We make good friends when we show confidence to people, when people can trust us, and that we should be trustworthy people in time of trouble and not being those who will betray them when they are in trouble. either through our false witness or either through not being proactive to take the side of somebody who needs your support. Such behavior, this proverb compares to a bad tooth and a foot out of joint. These two proverbs are talking about people who are bearing false witness unfaithfully in time of trouble. And what can happen? That can bring dangerous consequences, like experiencing a bad tooth, the severe pain of a toothache, or when your foot is not in proper condition. These things can cause such great damage and pain, which we should be careful not to let other people experience it because of who we are and what we are doing by bearing false witness, by not taking their side and supporting them. We have to make it a habit of never to bear false witness. For David prayed in Psalm 120, verse 2, "Deliver me, O Lord, from lying lips, from a deceitful tongue." David probably faced many people who brought allegations even against himself, telling lies, or he heard cases, and he says, "God, please deliver me," that he himself would never have to lie about somebody or speak deceitfully or never become even a target of such lying lips and deceitful tongue. David's prayer certainly calls for us to seriously consider either we are a target of somebody's lying lips or we practice ourselves such deceitful tongue speaking falsehood against our neighbors. But rather, our life should be one that will help somebody who needs our support through speaking the truth, standing by them when they may be going through difficult times, even if it need be that we can take risks for their sake, so that others can learn to trust us and we can lead people through their difficult situations. Let us not be those who will cause pain and suffering and misery to others. Somebody whose life is unreliable like a foot that slips, but rather those who would be strong and steady to support those who need our help. Job was one who experienced such betrayal from his own family and friends, his close friends. When he was going through suffering, there were his friends who came to comfort him, but they have only become his accusers. Oh, how much Job would have waited for somebody who would speak to soothe his pain and support him. Let us not be like the friends of Job, who should have brought happiness and relief from his suffering, but instead added fuel to the fire of what he was going through. We are called upon to be, in these Proverbs, to be supportive, helpful, neighbors rather than bearing false witness against others, and never to take advantage of others' hospitality. And thus, acquaintances can lead to sometimes wasteful time in gossip and slander. These things which we should avoid as the Holy Scriptures and the inspired writings and these Proverbs are instructing us today. May God bless each one of us as we in our day-to-day life go through such situations. Remember the instruction of God, that we can set before people an example of God's children, different from the world, following God's ways. God bless you and have a blessed day.